Hello again. Of all the frauds and deceptions practised upon the public in recent years, none has obtained greater respectability or more widespread acceptance than the natural food swindle. It has even been accorded the ultimate accolade of royal patronage, King Charles being a vociferous champion of the cause. Put simply, the basic tenet of the creed is this: natural means wholesome and good. Artificial means dangerous, toxic, and probably carcinogenic. This simple idea is applied not only to food, but to every aspect of modern life, from the generation of electricity to the construction of buildings. A key word when discussing natural food is organic, as in organic farming or organic vegetables. The mere use of this adjective confers an air of sanctity upon any substance or activity, be it ever so humble. So we find shops offering for sale organic carrots, the implication being that they are somehow different from and superior to the common or garden variety. The fact that all food is organic seems to escape notice. After all, who ever heard of an inorganic carrot? The theory, so far as it can be explained to non-believers, appears to be as follows. There is something inherently suspect and undesirable about anything made of or produced with the aid of chemicals. That the entire universe, including us and all our carrots, is made of nothing but chemicals is apparently neither here nor there. In the matter of fertilizers, for example, only decomposing plants and animals are acceptable as a source of nitrogen for growing crops. Fertilizer produced in a factory contains chemicals and is artificially prepared. It is consequently the work of the devil. Now, the fact of the matter is, of course, that one atom of nitrogen is utterly indistinguishable from another. Whether that atom comes from rotting potato peelings or from a white plastic sack labelled factory-produced fertilizer has no bearing whatever on the matter. The electrons, neutrons and protons that comprise a nitrogen atom are all identical and interchangeable. The only difference between the two atoms is that one comes from a natural source and the other has been made artificially from chemicals. We come here to the crux of the whole belief system. It is taken as given that anything natural is by definition good for us. This unspoken assumption has taken root so firmly in our society that even the most rational of us can find ourselves falling victim to it. In an unguarded moment last week, I bought a carton of orange juice whose label announced 100% natural, nothing artificial added. Not unnaturally, I assumed that I was buying pure orange juice. In fact, when I got it home, I found it had been sweetened with as much sugar as the stickiest of soft drinks. Well, the label told no more than the literal truth. Sugar is natural. It might rot your teeth and contribute to a host of diseases, but at least it isn't artificial. I suppose I could mix up a solution of orange juice, uranium and cyanide and then market it as a new orange drink, 100% natural, nothing artificial added. The point is that the natural world is full of things that are unhealthy for us and in many cases downright poisonous. Not a few of these substances have an alarming habit of finding their way into the food chain. For myself, I regard salmonella as the most natural and organic thing in the world, yet I have not the least desire to ingest it at the breakfast table. Indeed, I require the food industry to spare no pains in removing anything harmful from the food I eat and then preserving it from contamination in the most efficient way possible. Yet, even in this field, the natural food lobby is at work. I think some older viewers might remember the fuss about irradiated food in the 1980s. One of the best ways of destroying harmful bacteria and preserving food is using irradiation. The only problem is that not only does irradiation sound horribly artificial, The very word reminds one of radiation, with all the attendant negative images. Hiroshima, atomic weapons, nuclear power stations, leukemia, radiation, they all go hand in hand. Quite clearly, irradiation must be a bad thing. It's useless to explain that irradiation is simply a way of killing germs and it doesn't make food radioactive. So it was that an exceedingly useful way of making food safe had to be abandoned because of the idiocy of some people. There is a great irony here, one that provides us with a strong clue as to the real subconscious motivation behind the natural, organic, and back to nature movement. It is this: compelling evidence exists that two of the oldest and most familiar methods of preserving food in use today, that is to say, pickling and smoking, create carcinogens which permeate the treated food. In other words, there is good reason to think that kippers and pickled onions help cause cancer. It is if the motivations of those who oppose the introduction of irradiated food were logical, then we might expect to have seen a campaign to keep kippers off the shelves of the local supermarket. We've seen nothing of the sort, and for one simple reason: pickled onions and kippers have been around for a long while. They are produced with simple technology using familiar things like vinegar and wood smoke. We feel comfortable about them for the same reason that many people feel happier about putting horse manure on their allotments than they would about using nitrates. At the heart of it all lies a mistrust of science, technology, and the modern world in general. It is the same mentality that impels otherwise reasonable people to advocate demolishing nuclear power stations and replacing them with windmills. It can be summed up as old ways are good, new ways are bad. If we are building, then wood and stone are good materials to use. Brick is just about acceptable, but concrete and steel are to be avoided at all costs. It has nothing to do with practicality or convenience. Electricity should be generated only by water wheels and windmills. Farms should, as far as possible, be run without the benefit of 20th century science. The more primitive the agricultural techniques, the better the farm. The ideal farm would presumably be one with no machinery at all, using no artificial materials of any description. It is a simple philosophy, if not particularly rational. I mentioned King Charles earlier because he epitomises this type of thinking. His enthusiasm for organic gardening is, of course, well known. His general desire to turn back the clock in other ways can be clearly seen at Poundbury, the housing estate which he was instrumental in developing. Picturesque stone-clad cottages with unnecessary chimneys and tiny windows that barely admit enough daylight. A make-believe marketplace and old-world streetlights. The 20th century might never have happened at Poundbury. You can see this beautiful little confection in the thumbnail to this video. This is a hidden agenda of those who advocate organic food, a return to a spurious pre-industrial golden age. Nobody in their senses can doubt for a moment that the food we eat today is more wholesome than that eaten a century ago. It's cleaner, safer, more hygienically packaged, more efficiently preserved and stored than ever before. We have our advanced technological society to thank for this. Perhaps those who do wish to reject all advances in food technology made this century, for them it might be instructive to end by looking at some genuine organic farms. I actually lived and worked on an organic farm for a time, or a place that used organic farming. This was in Turkey in the mid-1970s, at the time when the country was just degenerating into a civil war. I found myself working on an irrigation project in a village up in the mountains in Anatolia, the edge of the Anatolian plateau. It was a village with no electricity and no piped water, and the idea was that we were digging an irrigation canal to bring water to the village. As in many parts of the world, a lot of the Middle East and South Asia, There were many villages at that time in Turkey having virtually no contact with the industrial world. No tractors, no fertilizers, no pesticides, no modern technology at all. Those communities recycled everything. They were perforce heavily into organic farming. One might have supposed that living such a natural life would bring good health and longevity, but disease was absolutely rife and infant mortality astronomically high. This is because in that village they recycled everything. Instead of dangerous chemical fertilizers, they spread, among other organic matter, feces, both animal and human, upon their fields. There was a huge pile by a hillside where everybody emptied their pots and all the shit built up, and they used to spread all that human excrement on their crops because they couldn't afford fertilizers. A natural and inevitable consequence of this was that the area had endemic cholera, typhoid, dysentery and hepatitis. I picked up typhoid there and hepatitis. Still, as I said above, natural and good are not always synonymous.